Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here on this Friday, September 13th. Maybe this is a precursor to Halloween with Friday the 13th. Hopefully there's nothing too frightful today for you. Uh, Other than maybe it's the end of the weekend, there's still a lot of things to still accomplish before the weekend. So that has its own scary vibes, perhaps. I'm Brett Nackman with the College Autism Network. Glad to have you here for our monthly College Autism Network Virtual Association of Scholars, or Canvas meeting. We have these as a mechanism to bring in some wonderful presenters to discuss their scholarship and work that might be relevant to all of you in the world of autism and higher education and related circles, of course, too. We recognize that many of you are just joining in right now, so I'm going to encourage you to jump into our meeting agenda, which I am once again putting in the chat. So asking you to please write your name and highlight it so that we know that you are in attendance. Not that we are doing a participation grade or anything, but we do want to document that for ourselves and to know who's actively part of our community. Also, a friendly reminder to please keep your microphones muted unless you want to share something verbally, just so we can eliminate background noise. But of course, we welcome you to put your thoughts and questions in the chat, and we will also be inviting you to contribute throughout as you'd like. A few reminders for you if you're not already on our College Autism Network a Virtual Association of Scholars listserv, Canvas listserv. Please be sure to do that because that's how you're going to be apprised of when our future presentations are, as well as our meeting recordings. We also see fairly frequently folks using this as a mechanism to share information about seeking participants for research studies and even debuting new articles or resources, posing questions to the community. So do feel free to utilize that. And we also encourage you, if you're not already, to be an official member of College Autism Network, for which you are entitled to a variety of benefits that support not only you and your engagement, but also benefit us as a nonprofit organization. And one of the benefits of being part of the College Autism Network via a membership is discounts to our College Autism Summit, which is a mere 4 weeks away. And with that, I will turn it over to Lee Williams, our Executive Director, to share what's happening on the summit front.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, 4 weeks away. I see a number of names on the screen, folks who are presenting or attending or both. So we're really looking forward to seeing you in Columbus, Ohio. If you haven't registered and you think you might want to go, it's an amazing lineup of sessions and speakers. And so I put the website for registration right in the chat. Also, next week we have a program directors gathering. These are sort of monthly discussions with program leaders. If you are not on our program administrators list, but are kind of in that role, whether it's a formal program or your campus initiative to support autistic students, if you're not on that list, send me an email and I'll add you to it. And that's how we communicate about those gatherings. We're going to be meeting next Wednesday, I believe, and talking about stresses and challenges and resources and ideas on top of everybody's mind as the school year starts. So we hope we'll see some of you there. Thanks, Brett.
Perfect. Thank you, Lee. Looking forward to seeing many of you next month in Columbus, Ohio. And at this point, we want to turn it over to you all. Are there resources you'd like to share with the wider community? An article you've read, if you're recruiting participants for a study, and I see we have one comment already in the meeting agenda toward that end. Jinx, I don't know if you are in attendance. If you are, if you'd like to share about the research study listed there. I don't think I see Jinx in the participants list, but it looks like, and I can put this all in the meeting notes down the line. They are seeking participants 18 and over for a dissertation on how we form impressions of autistic and non-autistic TV characters. It takes about an hour, but there's a short version that's automatically given to anyone who says that they don't have that much time to allocate. So I'm going to drop this in the chat, should anybody be inclined to participate or know folks who might. So I'm just copy and pasting that there. That looks actually very fascinating. And oh, okay, Mark is putting in the chat that they're in the process of publishing a website. Great, glad to hear that. Other thoughts or things that folks would like to contribute? It could also just be, often we use this as a space for if there are celebratory things happening in your life or the lives of the autistic folks in your circles, anything that folks would like to share. Well, I know it's still the beginning of the semester for many folks, so it's just getting things in order, or the beginning of the school year for that matter. Oh, okay, we have an update. Gina says that UMBC students are starting a neurodiverse student organization. That is great to know, and that sounds really encouraging. In fact, we're working in College Autism Network to try to get a more comprehensive sense of different student organizations across the country related to neurodiversity and autism and related topics. So definitely glad to be aware of that too. Thank you, Gina. Other things happening? Well, I'm going to use this as a moment before we transition to our main presentation to put in the chat if you are planning on attending the College Autism Summit, whether you've registered or you're going to soon enough, if you want to indicate in the chat that you are going, so that way some folks on the call might be able to recognize other names when they are going to be at the event. So if you want to put that in the chat, we would love to know that, and I'm sure your colleagues would love to know if you'll be there too. Looks like Maya mentions in the chat, Michigan State's College of Social Sciences is launching a career preparation course for ASD students. Great, that's awesome. Susan mentions that Appalachian State has a student org and a residential learning community for autistic and neurodivergent students. Good to know, absolutely. Looks like several folks listed here are going to be at the summit. Good to know from Ariel that Jacob and Nadine will be there. Wonderful. We'll be glad to see them. Well, I think at this point, we'll feel free if there's other things you want to put in the chat, be sure to do so. We'll catalog it. Connie, glad to see you'll be there too. Yes, feel free to contribute, continue contributing to that. But at this point, let's shift it over to our featured presentation for today. We have Dr. Dana Kanhai, who graduated with a PhD in higher adult and lifelong education from Michigan State University and is a talent development specialist. And Dana's dissertation work was very much focused on faculty engagement with autistic college students, and have followed all of her journey over the years. And it's really wonderful to actually, I remember Dana, we met at the summit 5 years ago, at the very first time in Nashville, and glad to see that you're continuing to do good work and engage with all of us today as it pertains to your scholarship. So we'll turn it over to you, and folks, if you have questions or comments, put them in the chat and we'll allocate time at the very end for for addressing those. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm guessing everyone can see my screen. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me. I'm really excited to present to everyone today. What I'll be focusing on is my dissertation research, which I wrapped up last year. It's a qualitative study, and as Brett mentioned, this study really focused on how faculty are responding very broadly to autistic college students. And I specifically looked at what kinds of behaviors are faculty engaging in the various aspects of their work, and what are the beliefs that undergird those behaviors. How are they being supportive, and essentially why they're being supportive. I come to this research as someone who identifies as neurotypical. I think that's important to mention before we get more into it. So again, thank you for having me. So I know this literature will be very familiar to the folks on this call. I just wanted to kind of touch on it to kind of frame why I was interested in this topic. As we know, a lot of the research on autistic college students has been increasing over the years. More recently, we've had great research coming out from the student perspective, so the autistic student perspective. Lots of participatory research I'm being engaged in right now. Obviously, lots of research from the perspective of autistic researchers, that's also been increasing. And all of this is really important as it expands our knowledge around how do we support autistic college students. There's still much to learn about faculty's experiences with students. Faculty obviously play an immense role in the lives of all students in higher education. And researchers in the past have found that, they especially impact the success and experiences of autistic students. Most of the research has been on, the kinds of accommodations that students are able to access in higher education. And some of that research has found that while some faculty go beyond those basic academic accommodations, most of the academic accommodations that are provided are, typical and standardized types of accommodations. So I was really curious as to, given the broad scope of faculty's role, they obviously do teaching and interact with students through teaching, but they also do service within their institutions in various forms. They may be engaged in community engagement outside of the university through research or other kinds of projects. And obviously, they are also engaged in research. Not a lot of the current research on autistic college students and their experiences or faculty work really touched on this broad aspect of faculty's work, all of these kinds of areas. So teaching, but also research, service, mentorship, coaching. That research was limited at the time that I started this project. So I was really curious as to what were faculty doing in all aspects of their work, and why were they doing it? So for this dissertation, I used the theory of planned behavior. I found that this theory provided me a framework to kind of explore broadly and uncover faculty's behaviors in these different aspects of their work and the beliefs that lay under these behaviors in research, teaching, service, coaching, or mentoring. It allowed me to kind of broadly operationalize what were these behaviors and to think about beliefs in three buckets, or three major areas. Because I also come to this work from a learning and development standpoint, from a professional development standpoint. And I really wanted to find out if we were to create training programs for professional development opportunities for faculty or staff in general in higher education to understand autism, understand autistic students' experiences, what are the beliefs that that training needs to really target? And I found that this theory really helped me to do that. So this theory posits that someone's intentions to do something is a good predictor of their actual behavior. So if someone has a strong intention to be supportive to autistic students, then it's more likely that they will be, right? Their beliefs impact or influence their intentions. And so the beliefs in this theory are in three buckets. They're behavioral beliefs, and behavioral beliefs are what are the benefits or the consequences broadly that any individual thinks about before they engage in a behavior, before they have an intention to engage in a behavior. So for faculty, they may be thinking about what are the benefits to the student if I were to use inclusive teaching practices, and that impacts their attitudes towards using those inclusive practices. So those are behavioral beliefs, really looking at what are the benefits and to whom are those benefits derived. Normative beliefs speak to the norms that put pressure on faculty in this case to act in a certain way. So for example, faculty may be looking at their peers and wondering who else within my group, who are the significant reference, who are engaging with autistic college students in supportive ways. They may also be looking at, is this enough of a significant reference in order for me to feel compelled to engage with students in that way? So what is the value with which they place on certain kinds of references? How are those reference role models for them? That impacts that kind of social pressure that one feels to interact in a particular way or to behave in a particular way towards autistic students. And then finally, control beliefs are those beliefs about the presence of barriers or supports for a particular behavior. And an example of this might be, does the individual feel like their wider institutional environment provides enough support in the way of maybe student accessibility resource centers, or do they provide enough support in terms of training for faculty? What are the supports? What are the barriers that might exist in one's environment that influences their perception of their own control over what they can and they cannot do as it relates to supporting autistic students? And so I chose this theory. It's been used to study a myriad of types of behaviors or behavioral choices. And some of that has been done in education as well. But I found that it provided a really open framework for thinking about behaviors and beliefs. So in my study, I used these specific elements, so behavioral beliefs, normative beliefs, control beliefs, and the kinds of behaviors that faculty are engaging in. So I didn't use the whole model, but I used particular elements of it given my research questions. This theory guided the way I thought about my research questions. It also guided my interview protocol. It also guided my coding and analysis throughout the study. If anyone has questions, I forgot to say, do feel free to drop it in the chat. I think Brett might help me with that, or to kind of unmute now or at the end. So these were my research questions very broadly. How do the salient beliefs of faculty shape their interactions with and support of autistic college students? How do faculty respond to autistic college students? So that's really looking at their behaviors. And then what are the behavioral, normative, and control beliefs that guide their responses to autistic college students? So my methodology was a basic qualitative research. Again, I chose this design because so much is still unknown, and the subject matter is quite underdeveloped in terms of how faculty's work is intersecting with autistic college students. So I found that this was a good design for this initial exploration of faculty work in this area. Interviews, I did semi-structured one-on-one interviews with 15 faculty members. I recruited, it was a convenience sample and then snowball on top of that. And I asked specifically for faculty members who knew they were interacting with autistic college students one way or the other. And 15 people graciously took part in my study. I used deductive coding. So from the theory, I developed some codes that I went in with as it related to beliefs and behaviors. And I used that in my initial review of my transcripts. And then I followed up with inductive coding because there were some things that were not necessarily falling neatly within the codes that I initially prepared. And I needed to account for that. So I followed up with inductive coding. As with all qualitative research, I did, several rounds of transcript reading and coding, and then creating codes from codes and subcodes, themes from the data, verbatim from the data. Okay, so some of my findings, the faculty that I spoke to, they were interacting and being supportive of autistic college students through many areas of their work. Teaching, research, through their service, and through coaching as well. Many faculty were involved and supportive of autistic college students in many aspects of their work. So for example, one faculty may say or said that in their teaching, their service that they're doing within their university or the wider community, as well as they would engage in coaching. So it was not limited to just one aspect of their work. Their approach to college students or their contact with college students who are autistic permeated various aspects of their work. Faculty also believed that their actions towards autistic students was overwhelmingly beneficial to autistic students, but as well as other autistic people. So this is true of faculty, especially if they were engaged in the community outside of their university community, the wider community. But they also noted that there were benefits for themselves as faculty members. There were also benefits for other students in their classes if they were teaching. So overwhelmingly, they saw that supporting autistic students was beneficial. Rarely was there a comment that what they were doing was negatively impacting them or their students or someone else, which is not unusual. Next, the approval of actually autistic students and people, as well as their colleagues, significantly influenced faculty's choices and also significantly influenced how they chose to learn about autism. I found that this was really interesting, especially given our movements towards including autistic voices more and more in research today. The presence of institutional supports and faculty members' skills to be adaptable and to challenge their own stereotypes or assumptions, allow them to overcome any barriers to acting in supportive ways to autistic students. It was not unusual for faculty to experience pushback from their disciplinary areas, and they were quite steadfast in their support to students. They also found that they were able to be steadfast and resolute when they felt supported by their institutions. Groups like other colleagues, other departments, autism research centers, or disability student services. That was really important in terms of their support and their decisions to keep being supportive of autistic students. So what this slide shows is a summary of the kinds of behaviors that faculty were engaged in the different aspects of their work. So for teaching, and again, these codes or these themes rather were derived specifically from what participants said in the study. So it's kind of like verbatim theming of the main core results of the research. So in teaching, faculty really spoke to keeping open lines of communication with their students. They talked about using responsive pedagogical strategies with their students, things like using differentiated learning, chunking information for their students, etc., using universal design principles in their teaching. They also talked about seeing and using the strengths of autistic students. So taking a very strengths-based approach to interacting with their students as opposed to a deficit-based approach. With service, many faculty were involved in educating other people about autism. So whether it's their colleagues, providing training to other departments, or providing training outside of the university setting. Some faculty were heavily involved in developing college autism transition programs in their universities or support programs. In terms of research, faculty spoke about doing participatory research, and they were all at different phases or stages of doing that. Many of them learning as they went, and they did this research. They also spoke about co-authoring with autistic researchers and students who were autistic, and really making intentional choices to do so. And then finally, they just talked about doing research on or about autism or autistic experiences in general. And then they also got involved in coaching. And I framed it as coaching because more so than mentoring, coaching was predominantly kind of short instances of providing advice or suggestions or helping students to figure out problems, as opposed to maybe developing longer-term coaching relationships, although that did occur as well. So this gives a kind of a brief synopsis of the types of behaviors that faculty indicated were supportive in the different aspects of their work. What I'll do next is I'll get into what were the beliefs that faculty talked about in terms of the beliefs that supported them to engage in these behaviors and to sustain them in these behaviors. Yeah, please do get those questions in there. Try to do my best to navigate back and forth. Okay. So in the rest of this presentation, I use some illustrations that a really gifted illustrator, Daniel Blaze, did for me. They are autistic themselves, and I found that it was really helpful for me going through this process of analyzing this data to visually represent what some of the really important stories were coming out in this research. So you'll see a lot of these illustrations, comic illustrations that Daniel did for me, and I really thank them for that. So in terms of behavioral beliefs, and just as a reminder, behavioral beliefs are what do faculty believe is the benefit, and to whom is the benefit derived from the behaviors that they're engaging in. And so faculty overwhelmingly believe that their behaviors were supportive to themselves, to students, to other students, to the community in general. One of the themes that I developed in this section on behavioral beliefs is that faculty believed that autistic students experienced triumph and felt empowered when they, the faculty, interacted with them in supportive ways. So faculty believe that in their teaching, how they educated or advised other faculty, or how they developed programs in their universities or for communities of autistic people, these all led to creating an environment where students could feel triumph and empowered. So in their teaching, faculty, for example, used pedagogical strategies such as differentiated instruction or universal design because they believe that these inclusive approaches could allow students to do their best and feel welcome and included and safe in their classes and could put their best foot forward in their classes. Faculty were really sensitive to the fact that many of their students that they encountered may not have had positive experiences in the K-12 system, and so they often felt compelled or felt an obligation to create an environment where in college, these autistic students could feel safe, could have their strengths recognized, and could feel empowered and experience success in the classroom. So this quote here represents a quote or an explanation from Russell. He was a piano pedagogy professor, and he just really talked about wanting to provide that experience for students where they can experience triumph, success. So for example, he would, use differentiated learning or chunk pieces. He may say to a student who's autistic, just practice these next 3 minutes of this musical piece for the next session that he had with them. And that's not something that he did with his neurotypical students. So he did that specifically for his autistic students, recognizing that that is a strategy that would be useful to them and would help them to be successful. One of the other themes that I developed is faculty believe that through their actions, students could strengthen their social skills or their social networks or their communities, and it would essentially create a safe space for students to be able to do that. So faculty did this through coaching in particular, without any expectation or desire to change students or make them, what one faculty said, they didn't want to make the students quote unquote normal. That was not what was their desire, nor that they think that that was the thing to do. It was not necessary. What they really wanted to do was to provide opportunities for students to connect with other students. So for example, Russell, he helped connect one student who's autistic to someone else in the class because they thought they would be good friends. Or he helped the students, better manage their course load because he thought the student would have gotten overwhelmed. So kind of coaching and advice in that vein. See some questions popping up here. Yeah, so I recruited through my networks. So I recruited through my personal networks, through some professional networks. I did find some really great people. So that's, one of the, I guess one of the limitations of the research is that the people that I did speak to were all people who had a desire to be supportive and had a desire to be use strategies that probably went above and beyond what some other faculty might do. So yeah, that's a great question. Fleur is another student, another faculty rather, who talked about providing that sense of community, and she became that student's community, right? She had a student who would sometimes, feel overwhelmed. He would be agitated. He'd pace the hallways in the department. And other people knew that they had a good relationship, the faculty that I spoke to and her autistic student. And they'd say, hey, would you come talk to this student? It seems like he needs you. And she would always make the time for that student. And that really helped them. So normative beliefs, I'll get into now. This again is, the beliefs that faculty have about which significant reference approve or disapprove of their behaviors. Are those reference role models for faculty themselves? And how much value is faculty placing on what other people think? So think about normative beliefs as which groups approve or disapprove of one's behaviors. And so I identified several groups as being influential to faculty. And one such group that all faculty talked about was actually autistic people. All participants talked about learning about autism or learning about autistic people and how to support autistic people from autistic people. And so most faculty express that, therefore, the approval for what they did or how they interacted with autistic people was really important for them. And I thought that this was really interesting because I had never seen that in the research before. And so faculty sometimes talked about more, I suppose, well-known figures in autism. So for example, two faculty talked about having interactions with Temple Grandin, doing work with Temple, and that really impacting how they understood autism, particularly autism as a lifelong condition. Others talked about their students or their family members that they were related to who were autistic. Nina, in particular, talked about using a participatory approach in her research, which was very unusual for her area of research. And she really spoke to wanting to do that because of prioritizing autistic voices. And she was really kind of going against the grain of what applies in her disciplinary area. But she was really steadfast. She was resolute. She was really committed to hearing what autistic people had to say and including them in her research process. Colleagues were also a source of normative beliefs for faculty in this study. colleagues in particular were role models, and faculty participants who saw colleagues as experts or expertise, or having expertise or experience in interacting with college students who are autistic in really supportive ways. The study participants really valued their input. So this example from Patricia, she worked with a doctoral student, and she made observations of a colleague. And she said, you know, just seeing how her colleague interacted with the student led her to believe that the student was valuable and had something to offer and belonged in the program. And so even before she even interacted with the student, she had this impression of an autistic person that was positive. And then she modeled her own behavior by watching another faculty member who was direct, spoke in plain language with the student, and that seemed to work best for that faculty, so it would work best for her as well. So faculty really learned from each other as well, how to interact with and how to be productive and positive in their interactions with their students. In terms of control beliefs really speak to faculty's perceptions about any supports or hindrances or barriers to acting in a particular way. And so one of the themes that I developed here is that faculty acknowledge that they have the skill to challenge their own stereotypes and assumptions. So they all admitted that, you know, they, like anyone else, may have biases, and it's therefore important to challenge one's biases. So I saw a question here. It sounds like faculty were very knowledgeable about autism. Did they go to a specific training? Yeah, that's an awesome question. There was a mix of, I guess, knowledge levels about autism. So there were some faculty who had very, very limited knowledge about autism. Their knowledge about autism just came from interacting with their students. And then there were some faculty who were quite knowledgeable, and their area of study was autism and the experiences of autistic students. Many of the faculty, almost all of them, lamented that in their personal experience, they didn't have opportunity to be trained and didn't have access in their institutions to professional development around autism and how to be supportive of autistic students. So we did see a mix of experiences given who I was able to interview for this study, but they all talked about their institutions often lacking that facility to provide adequate professional development. Many of the faculty, if they had an interest in how to be supportive of autistic students, many of them did it on their own. They sought out their own training. That's a really great question. So control beliefs, again, what are the barriers or what are the supports? And one of the supports was people realize that they have biases and that they need to challenge those biases. So for example, one faculty, she talked about, kind of making a snap judgment about a student because of the way that they spoke. And then she was able to challenge that snap judgment that then allowed her to see that, maybe she was not seeing the student's strengths. And had she now approached the student to look for their strengths, that changed her opinion of the student. Fleur really was a participant who I thought gave this really beautiful explanation of how she recognized her own biases and her own prejudices. And she had to relax her mind or relax her eyes. So I interpreted that almost as relaxing her own biases, recognizing that she has them, and to be able to see the individual for who they are and understand that their behaviors may, while it may seem different, it's part of who they are, and it's a different way of orienting themselves, is what she said. And that allowed her to then create space for understanding the individual at a deeper level and finding out what they need in the moment. So I think I just kind of touched on this barrier of a lack of professional development. What's interesting is that even in those institutions where there was a targeted supports program, so Daniel, for example, was at an institution where there was a specific support program for autistic students. It was fee-based. Even she said, within my institution, there's a lack of training. So it's a really interesting space to be in an institution, I think, for her and another participant, where there is a support program, but the vision or mission of that program is not necessarily to train faculty. It's really to be there to support the students, make sure that they get their accommodations. They do provide student peer aids. They will train faculty, but sometimes the training is put on, it's scheduled, and then no one shows up. So there's a struggle in some institutions to either provide the training or to kind of gain interest for the training. So in the interest of time, I'm gonna skip these summary slides and jump into implications and recommendations. So again, I came to this research from our learning and development background. And so I made some recommendations around faculty development opportunities. What should that look like? Definitely it should reflect autistic knowledge and preferences and experiences. Autistic expertise. I think Dr. Wiseman's and colleagues' recent study really shows how impactful that can be when that process is followed. And it fits with what my research found, in that faculty are valuing and see as a kind of a positive peer, positive pressure to do things that actually autistic people say is important for them in terms of the kinds of support that they need. Faculty are open to that. I also think that, training should, or professional development should, amplify the perceived benefits of support practices towards autistic students. So it's like anyone else. I think faculty have decisions to make around how they use their time. The one, I think, major or significant barrier that was highlighted in this study from one faculty member was that it can sometimes be time-consuming, or it was time-consuming for her to support her student the way that she did. She was heavily involved. So what the theory states that I used is, people are always making judgments around the value of things. What are the benefits they can derive? And faculty, I think, are no different. And so it's important then, when we're kind of designing our instruction or professional development, that we can amplify or show faculty what's in it for them, in addition to what's in it for the students who are autistic, what's in it for other groups who may benefit from them gaining this knowledge that they can apply in different aspects of their work. We should definitely provide faculty with the opportunity to feel supported by wider networks. It's a lot that faculty have to do in their jobs, and it's important to provide them with that support. So training and professional development should be provided not just for them, but we should have other departments trained on how do you support autistic students, because autistic students interact with not just faculty, but the entire institution. So that's really important. I think we should acknowledge that people come in with biases, prejudices, misconceptions, and provide opportunities for them to be able to share those and uncover and do that self-reflection during professional development opportunities to uncover what are these beliefs that they have that they can challenge through this training. Faculty development should include where to find additional supports. Some faculty said, I don't know where to go to get information about how to support my autistic students. I don't know where to go for training for me, and I don't know where to direct them to go. So, it's important that we provide some sort of resource guide for a faculty that is comprehensive and doesn't treat students or the student body as just one kind of monolithic body with who don't have specific needs. Students are different. It's important to kind of point out, for an autistic student, this may be a resource that might be particularly useful for them. And also recognizing that in terms of teaching in particular, students will come into contact with teaching assistants, graduate teaching assistants, or you have graduate students who are aspiring faculty. And wouldn't it be great if during that process of learning their discipline and writing their dissertation and teaching in a university, they are exposed to training that will be useful for them when they begin their career as a faculty. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much. What other questions do you have?
Thank you so much, Dana. I'm looking through the chat to see if there were some other questions that surfaced that weren't addressed. Ariel has one that I don't think was answered yet. I'm just going to read it verbally. I'm not sure how to succinctly ask this question. I'm curious about the theme of faculty feeling validated by autistic students, giving them positive feedback on their approach to autism. It makes me think of the common faculty problem, which is one negative student evaluation comment would overshadow 100 positive ones. Did participants in your study describe any negative feedback that they received from autistic students or non-autistic students? If so, how did they address them in their minds and planning? These faculty seem to represent the resilient ones who keep trying to do better, but are there any insights from those from them that could help faculty who are just starting down this path?
Yeah, that's a great question. So possibly that was one of the limitations of my study. I didn't specifically ask that because I was very, I guess, constrained or bounded by the theory that I used, and as a result, the interview protocol that I used. Some faculty did mention, for example, asking this faculty member helped create a program that in their wider community that engaged high schoolers and college students who were autistic. And she said, she may ask the student, how did you find the program, or how did you find the workshop that they intended? And the autistic student or the participant was like, it was awful. I didn't like it. So they were very honest. And, she said she had to realize that she can't take these things personally. And that was one of the sub-themes that came up throughout the research with many of the faculty members. Is they said, you have to be aware of how someone communicates. This is how the student may be communicating. It has nothing to do with you. Don't take things personally. Was one of the quit taking things personally. Q-tip was the tip that was provided, and I thought that was really awesome for them to kind of decenter themselves in the process, and for them to say, okay, well, maybe I need to do something differently, or hey, the person is just being honest with me. So that was one great example to share. I don't know if that answers your question.
I see a comment saying excellent example, thank you. So
Yeah.
seems that like that did the
Okay.
job. We have another
Okay,
question
great.
in the chat, and I think you alluded a little bit earlier in terms of recruitment, but
Mhm.
Juliet had asked, were all the faculty part of the same university or across different institutions?
Yeah, so they were across different institutions. So 15 faculty across different institutions. There were some faculty at the same institution. Yeah, so different faculty across different institutions. Some faculty knew each other because again, it was convenient sampling and then snowballing. So people told people. So yeah. That's it.
Wonderful. And we are actually just about at time. So I think we'll wrap up at this juncture. But thank you so much for delivering a great presentation, lots of thoughtful reflections. And it seems like we have a lot to learn from these faculty participants in terms of how they're engaging with their autistic students and the steps they're taking for their own professional development too. So thanks for adding to the literature on that front and engaging with all of us today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for all the great questions.
Yeah, lots of good ones.
Yeah.
And on this note, we're going to wrap up. So we invite you all to come back in just a matter of a few weeks because we have our College Autism Summit in mid-October. So we're going to do our Canvas presentation at the very beginning of October. It is set for Friday, October 4th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have Dr. Cassio, who is here today, discuss a really interesting topic as it pertains to more of the methodology of research, which is dealing with scams in remote interview research, finding fakers without adding barriers, and how this applies as we engage in work involving autistic people. So kind of a unique and cool topic that will also have a lot of transferability. So we'll look forward to that. We'll send out information leading up to it with the link and all the details. In the meantime, we will look forward to you hopefully participating on the Canvas listserv. And a final reminder, you're going to want to sign up for the College Autism Summit shortly if you plan on attending and joining us in Columbus. But wish you all have a good weekend ahead, and we'll see you soon. Take care.